What's up, brave souls? And welcome back to RealFear Files, the place where nightmares creep off the screen and into your mind. Tonight, I'm serving up 9 bone-chilling ghost stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the world beyond. These aren't your average campfire tales. These are real encounters, drawn from the raw, terrifying experiences of people who came face to face with the unexplainable. We're talking shadowy figures lurking where they shouldn't be, whispers echoing in empty rooms, doors that slam on their own, and the kind of cold dread that sticks to your skin. Every single story has been carefully reworked from first-hand accounts, with names and details altered to protect identities. But the terror? That's all real. So, if you've got the guts, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a dive into the unknown. Because once these stories start, you'll be looking over your shoulder, and you'll never feel completely alone in the dark again. Story 1. Gabriel, 22, a college kid fed up with jam-packed dorm rooms and roommates who never shut up, thought the idea sounded like heaven. 2 full weeks of peace, quiet, and that rare kind of calm you only get when you're totally alone. The house itself had been around for over a century, a massive 2-story building with white clapboard siding and a wraparound porch that groaned under every footstep. His parents had owned it for 15 years, since Gabriel was 7, and he'd spent endless weekends there as a kid. He knew every nook and cranny, from the musty basement with its stone foundation to the attic stacked high with boxes of long-forgotten stuff. The house had its quirks. Pipes that whined in the walls, floors that popped and shifted when temperatures changed, windows that rattled when the wind kicked up. Nothing he couldn't chalk up to ordinary house noises. His parents left on a Thursday morning in mid-December. Gabriel watched the car fade down the gravel driveway, taillights dissolving into the gray winter fog. The forecast said snow was coming later in the week, but for now, it was just cold and overcast. He spent the first day settling in, unpacking his laptop and textbooks, stocking the fridge, and making sure the thermostat would keep the old place warm. By evening, he had a routine down. Dinner at 6, a few hours of studying, then some video games before hitting the sack. The house was quiet, save for the familiar sounds he'd grown up with. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the grandfather clock, the occasional creak as the wood shifted. That first night, he slept like a rock. But the second night, something felt off. He woke at exactly 3 a.m., not slowly, but all at once, like someone had flipped a switch inside his brain. His room was pitch dark, lit only by the faint glow of his phone charging on the nightstand. For a second, he just lay there, wondering what had yanked him awake. Then he heard it. Knock, knock, knock. 3 sharp raps on glass. His heart started hammering. The knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. Same pace, same intensity, coming from the living room. Gabriel tossed off the blankets and crept to his bedroom door. The hallway was dim, lit only by the nightlight his mom kept near the bathroom. Step by step, he inched down the stairs, each one groaning under his weight, despite his best efforts to be quiet. The living room windows looked out to the front yard. Peeking around the corner, he saw nothing. No one there. No movement. Just the frozen grass and gravel driveway. He pressed his face to the cold glass and scanned left and right. Still nothing. Maybe a branch, he told himself. Maybe the wind had blown something against the window. But there was no wind. The night was dead still. He checked the front door. Locked. Back door? Locked too. Every ground floor window? Secured. Feeling a mix of embarrassment and unease, Gabriel trudged back to bed. Sleep took nearly an hour. The knocking returned the following night. Same time, same window. 3 sharp raps pulling him awake at exactly 3 a.m. This time, he moved faster, 2 stairs at a time, racing to the living room. He switched on the porch light and threw open the front door. Cold air hit him, misting from his breath, but the porch and yard were empty. No animals, no branches, no rational explanation. Back inside, he locked the door and tried to sleep, but the night dragged on with restless tossing. By the 4th night, Gabriel decided to stay up. Coffee in hand, he parked on the living room couch, laptop on his lap, determined to catch whatever was causing the noise. He watched the clock tick. 2:45, 2:50, 2:55. At 2:58, he felt it, a sudden chill. His breath became visible, even though the thermostat read 72 degrees. The hairs on his neck stood straight up. Exactly at 3 a.m., the knocking started again. Knock, knock, knock. But now, it wasn't coming from the window. It was coming from behind him, from inside the house. Gabriel spun around. The hallway was empty. The sound came again, and he realized it was coming from the basement door. Someone, or something, was on the other side. Dry mouth, pounding heart. His instincts screamed to run, call the cops, get out. But another voice, the rational one, urged him to look for a logical explanation. He grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer, hand trembling as he reached for the basement door. The knocking stopped. He stood frozen for a full minute, flashlight raised like a weapon. Silence. Slowly, he unlocked the old deadbolt and pulled the door open. The basement stairs plunged into darkness. A flick of the light switch illuminated a weak yellow glow over the concrete floor and stone walls. Nothing stirred. He descended cautiously, each step creaking under him. The basement was unfinished, mostly used for storage. Boxes lined the walls. An old furnace rumbled in the corner. Shelves held paint cans, tools, and forgotten household odds and ends. He scanned every corner. Empty. All the basement windows were locked from the inside. No one could have snuck in. Breathing heavily, Gabriel tried to stay logical. Sure, old houses made weird noises. Pipes creaked, wood shifted. But none of that explained the deliberate, rhythmic knocking, or the sudden cold snap. And then he noticed something. An old wooden cabinet tucked against the far wall, partially hidden behind boxes. He'd seen it a million times, but now the door was ajar, like someone had been poking around recently. He crept closer. The cabinet held only rusted paint cans and some old rags, but beneath them he spotted something new. A gap in the back panel. He pried it open. Behind the wood was a hollow space containing a metal box, roughly the size of a shoebox, covered in rust and grime. Carrying it upstairs, his mind raced. Under the bright kitchen lights, he examined it carefully. Not locked, just stiff hinges. Inside were old papers, faded photographs, a few tarnished pieces of jewelry, and a brittle, leather-bound journal. The handwriting was elegant but brown with age. The first entry, August 1952. The journal belonged to Thomas Brennan, a man who had lived in the house in the early 50s with his wife, Catherine. At first, the entries were ordinary, daily chores, weather notes, trips to town. But as Gabriel read on, Thomas became obsessed with hiding something valuable. He wrote about mistrusting banks and stashing his wealth where no one could find it. The final entries from January 1953 showed rising paranoia. Thomas was convinced someone was watching, trying to steal what he'd hidden. The last entry, dated January 15, 1953, was frantic. They're coming. I can hear them. I have to protect what's mine. I'll hide it where no one will ever find it. Behind the wall. Only I know. Nothing after that. Gabriel stared at the page, piecing it together. A quick search confirmed it. Thomas Brennan, Pennsylvania, 1953. Found dead in the basement 5 days later. Heart failure listed as the cause. Likely stressed from searching his hidden stash. Catherine found him 3 days after his death. Gabriel felt a chill. Thomas had died in this very basement, hunting for something. And the knocking, the basement door, the cabinet, it all clicked. But Gabriel didn't believe in ghosts. There had to be a rational reason. That night, Gabriel slept with his bedroom door locked and a chair wedged under the handle. Sleep came in broken bursts, punctuated by dreams of knocking, cold basements, and a desperate man rifling through the dark. By morning, he was wiped out, but determined. He wasn't going to let Thomas Brennan's efforts go unfinished. He spent the day in the basement, systematically checking every wall, every corner, every conceivable hiding spot. Boxes, furniture, and old shelves were moved aside, walls tapped for hollow spots. Hours passed. Then, in the far corner behind the furnace, he noticed it. A section of the stone foundation that sounded different. The mortar was slightly off color, like it had been replaced at some point. With a chisel and hammer from his dad's toolbox, Gabriel carefully chipped at the mortar. Sweat beaded his forehead. After an hour of patient work, one stone finally loosened. Behind it was a tiny cavity, and inside, another metal box. Smaller than the first, but heavier. Gabriel hauled it upstairs into the light. Inside were bundles of old bills, 20s and 50s, from the 1940s and 50s, all tied with rubber bands now sticky with age. Nearly $15,000. A fortune in 1953. Enough to drive a man paranoid. Enough to die protecting. That night, Gabriel waited. He sat on the living room couch, the metal box on the coffee table, lights blazing, heart thumping. Part of him felt ridiculous, expecting something paranormal. But deep down, he knew this night would be different. At exactly 3 a.m., the air shifted. His breath fogged in the room. The lights flickered slightly, and at the far end of the hallway, a figure appeared. Not solid but translucent, the shape of a man in work clothes, suspenders over a simple shirt, boots dusted with dirt. The figure didn't move toward him or the box. It just stood there, watching. Gabriel's voice cracked when he spoke, barely above a whisper. "Thomas?" No words came. The figure lifted one hand, pointing not at Gabriel, not at the metal box, but toward the backyard, toward the old family cemetery at the edge of the property where previous owners rested. The message was clear. Gabriel understood. Morning sunlight broke through the gray clouds. He bundled up and carried the metal box to the cemetery. The iron fence was low, rusted, and tilting in places. There were 6 worn graves, headstones smooth with age. Thomas Brennan's was easy to find, 1905 to 1953. Using a shovel from the barn, Gabriel dug a small hole next to the marker and buried the box. Dirt and frozen grass covered it completely. Standing over the grave, he spoke aloud. "It's yours. Safe now. Nobody will touch it." The words felt silly, but almost immediately, the weight pressing on his chest eased. The air felt warmer, lighter. Somehow, he knew Thomas Brennan had finally found peace. That night, 3 a.m. came and went without knocking, cold air or ghostly figures. Gabriel slept through it, the first uninterrupted night in a week. When his parents returned, he told them he'd discovered old belongings in the basement and learned about the house's history. He didn't mention the knocking, the apparition, or the buried money. They wouldn't have believed him, and he didn't blame them. He probably wouldn't have believed it either a month ago. Now, whenever he visited the farmhouse, he made a point to stop by the little cemetery. He'd stand by Thomas Brennan's grave, silently acknowledging the man who had died chasing security he'd never enjoy. The man trapped between worlds for 70 years, unable to rest because of his hidden fortune. Gabriel still didn't call himself a believer in ghosts, but he knew some things weren't explained by logic. Some presences linger. Some deaths leave echoes. And sometimes, helping a restless spirit find peace is as simple as finishing what they started, giving them permission to let go. The house was quiet now. The knocking never came back. But on bitter winter nights, when the wind howled across the open fields, Gabriel sometimes wondered if Thomas Brennan had truly departed. Or if he had finally found what he was seeking. Not money, not security, but someone who understood. Someone who cared enough to set things right. Someone who proved that even in death, you're not completely forgotten. Sometimes, Gabriel thought, the only thing keeping us tethered to this world is unfinished business, waiting for the right person to tie up the loose ends we leave behind. And now, Gabriel knew. He had been that person. Story 2. Riley had always done things on her own. At 19, living at home while going to a local community college wasn't a hassle. It made sense. She had her own routines, her own space, and her parents knew better than to micromanage her. They'd taught her to stay alert, trust her gut, and always notice what was going on around her. But nothing in all those life lessons could have readied her for the weekend that would flip her sense of safety upside down. Her folks were heading to a wedding several states away. One of Dad's old college buddies was tying the knot, and the invite required a long weekend. There was a lot of back and forth about leaving Riley alone for 4 days, but she was adamant. "I've got this," she said. She had a phone, she knew the neighbors, and besides, she had homework and shifts at the bookstore to keep her busy. Eventually, they relented, leaving on Thursday afternoon, promising to check in every day. The first night was calm. Riley cooked herself a simple dinner, caught a few shows, and was in bed by midnight. Their house wasn't anything fancy, a 2-story in a sleepy neighborhood where everyone knew everyone. The Hendersons next door were an older couple who'd lived there forever. The Patels had 2 kids who could be heard laughing and running around their yard every afternoon. Packages left on porches stayed untouched until their owners came back. Riley felt snug, even protected. Then came the first phone call Friday evening. It rang at 7:30 while she was finishing leftover pizza and scrolling through her feed. Unknown number. She picked up, expecting a wrong number or some spam. "Hello?" Silence. Then, breathing. Slow, heavy, deliberate. "Hello?" she repeated, voice firmer now. The breathing lasted another 5 seconds before the line went dead. Riley stared at the screen, unsettled but not panicked. Probably a kid messing around, she reasoned. 20 minutes later, another call. Different number. Same eerie breathing. She hung up immediately, blocked it, and tried to focus on homework sprawled across the kitchen table. But her mind wouldn't cooperate. At 9:15, a third call. She didn't pick up this time. It went straight to voicemail. She checked it. 30 seconds of that same unsettling breath. By 10, she'd had 7 calls, each from a new number, all the same pattern. Her first instinct was to call her parents, but they were hours away. What could they do? She debated dialing the cops, but it felt silly. How do you report prank calls? They'd likely just tell her to switch off her phone. So, she took precautions herself. Every door locked, windows secured, curtains drawn, outside lights on. Upstairs, she bolted her bedroom door and tried to sleep. The calls stopped around midnight. She lay there, phone on the nightstand, listening to the house. The furnace, the ice maker, the settling wood. Sleep finally came around 2 a.m., but it was fitful. Saturday started off normal. Riley slept in, made coffee, and tried to chalk up the previous night to a random prank. Some bored kid with nothing else to do. But at noon, the phone rang again. Unknown number. She ignored it. It went to voicemail. This time, there was a voice, low and strange, distorted like it was being fed through a broken speaker. "I can see you." 3 words, then silence. Riley's blood ran cold. She was standing in the kitchen, visible through the window above the sink. Her heart hammered as she hit the floor, crawling to the living room to peek through the curtains. The street looked normal. Cars parked neatly, a neighbor walking a dog, nothing out of place. But someone was watching. Someone knew she was alone. She called the police. The dispatcher sounded professional but calm. Prank calls happened all the time. They'd send a cruiser to pass by, but unless Riley saw someone on her property or was in immediate danger, there wasn't much they could do. She was advised to stay inside and lock everything, calling back if things escalated. Riley sank to the floor in the living room, back against the wall, clutching her phone. Then the calls came again. This time, anger flared through the fear. "What do you want?" she demanded. A distorted voice answered instantly. "You're wearing a blue shirt, gray sweatpants." Her stomach flipped. She looked down. Blue shirt, gray sweatpants. The caller could see her. "Where are you?" she asked, trying to steady her voice. "Closer than you think." The line went dead. She bolted to the front door, peering through the peephole. Empty street. Back door? Backyard fenced in, silent. Windows on the ground floor? Nothing. Whoever was out there had a vantage point, but where? She grabbed her laptop, pulled up the map. Behind the house, a small wooded area, a thin strip of trees separating streets. Someone could be crouched there with binoculars or a camera, watching. The calls kept coming, each one more specific than the last. "You just looked out the back window. You're in the kitchen now. Are you scared yet?" Riley stopped picking up, but the messages persisted. She pulled every curtain, turned off all the lights, and huddled in the downstairs bathroom, the only interior room with no windows. She tried contacting her parents, but no answer. They were probably at wedding events, phones off. Friends? What would she even say? Come protect me from calls? Ridiculous. At 5:30 p.m., the phone rang again. No distortion this time. Clear male voice, likely mid-30s. "Riley. That's your name, right?" Riley. Hearing her name spat by a stranger broke something inside her. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "I want you to understand something," the man said. "I've been watching you for weeks. I know your schedule. I know when you leave for work. I know when your parents leave. And right now, you are completely alone." Riley hung up and immediately dialed 911. This time, the dispatcher treated her seriously. Names, schedules, escalating calls. Units were dispatched. She stayed in the bathroom, locked, listening for sirens, praying they arrived before whoever was out there decided to escalate. Within 8 minutes, 2 officers were at the house. Riley heard them knock, announce themselves, but stayed put until the dispatcher confirmed the house was safe. Riley stayed frozen in the bathroom as footsteps echoed through the house, officers calling out to each other. Then came the familiar knock on the door. "Ma'am, this is Officer Torres. You're okay to come out now. The house is clear." Riley opened the door. hands trembling, her blanket still wrapped around her. Officer Torres, a woman in her 40s with calm, sharp eyes, gave her a reassuring nod. Her partner, Officer Kim, was crouched near the couch, scrolling through her phone, making notes. They had her sit and slowly recount everything: the calls, the messages, the increasingly precise threats. Torres checked all the locks and windows while Kim documented the phone numbers. "Your home security is solid," Torres said finally. "Deadbolts, locks, all good. Whoever this is hasn't tried to get inside. Yet. But the fact they can see you, that's worrying." Kim looked grim. "We're going to trace these numbers, but first, I want to try something with your permission." Riley nodded, voice barely above a whisper. Kim redialed the last number that had called her. The phone rang, and then, faint but unmistakable, Riley heard a ringing coming from outside, in the backyard. All three froze. Torres drew her sidearm, flashlight in hand, and cautiously stepped toward the back door. Kim called for backup on the radio. Riley stayed rooted in the kitchen, heart pounding. Torres swung the door open onto the patio. The ringing stopped. Kim redialed. The ringing started again, closer this time. Torres advanced across the yard, light cutting through shadows. "Police! Show yourself!" she shouted. Riley's breath caught in her throat. Someone had been in her backyard, literally yards away, calling her from a phone in hand. She could barely process the thought. Torres reached the back fence, scanning into the trees behind the house. "We've got movement!" she yelled. Branches snapped, leaves rustled. Someone sprinted through the underbrush. Within moments, 2 more patrol cars arrived. Officers fanned out, combing the yard and woods. Riley sat at the kitchen table, wrapped in the blanket Kim had given her, watching the chaos unfold. 20 minutes later, they had him. A man, 37, clutching a phone, binoculars, and a backpack. Inside, photographs of Riley taken with a long lens, a notebook detailing her daily routines, times she left for work, times her parents were home, and photos of her at the bookstore, coffee shop, and gas station. Officers identified him as Derek Sutton, recently released from prison after serving time for breaking and entering, stalking, and assault. He had apparently set his sights on Riley, following her for almost 2 months, documenting her every move. The weekend her parents were away had been his window of opportunity. Torres sat with Riley as the other officers processed the scene. "You did everything right," she said. "You trusted your instincts. You called for help. You stayed safe." But Riley didn't feel safe. She felt violated. For weeks, someone had been shadowing her, photographing her, learning her schedule, planning who knows what. The wedding her parents attended now felt like a trap, though Torres assured her it was likely coincidence. Still, the thought lingered. Her parents drove through the night to get home, arriving at 6 a.m., exhausted and pale. Riley had never seen her father cry before. They held her tightly as the flood of fear, shock, and relief poured out. Sutton was charged with stalking, harassment, trespassing, and possession of burglary tools. The district attorney felt confident the case would stick, potentially sending him back to prison for a long stretch. But the damage to Riley's sense of safety had already been done. Within a month, her family moved to a new neighborhood. Riley changed her phone number, wiped her social media accounts, and became hyper-aware of her surroundings. She stopped walking alone, never posted her location online, and constantly scanned for threats. Every window felt like an eye, every shadow a potential danger. But what haunted her the most was just how close he had been. A man crouched in the trees behind her house, watching her every move, calling her, thriving on the fear he had caused. If she hadn't called 911 when she did, if the officers hadn't thought to trace the number, If Sutton had decided to escalate further, she couldn't bear to think about it. Late at night, when the house was silent and she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she couldn't shake the what if. What if he had stopped calling and started knocking? What if the safety measures she had relied on weren't enough? Riley tried not to dwell on it, but the memory lingered like a shadow she couldn't outrun. Even months later, she flinched at unknown calls, avoided certain streets, and double-checked locks obsessively. She carried the memory of that weekend like a scar, a constant reminder that safety could never be taken for granted. But she also carried the knowledge that she had survived, that she had acted quickly, and that her instincts had been her first line of defense. And while the fear never fully left her, Riley understood something crucial. Even in the face of terror, staying calm, calling for help, and trusting herself had made all the difference. Story 3. Caleb had been on the hunt for a place to live in the city for almost 3 weeks. Fresh out of college, with a gig as a junior graphic designer, he needed an apartment that wouldn't shred his paycheck, but was still close enough to the office so he could get to work without stress. Most spots he checked were either sky-high rent, falling apart, or in neighborhoods his mom would have called sketchy. So when he stumbled across a listing for a one-bedroom in a converted brownstone, he jumped at the chance. The rent was solid, the location was prime, and the photos showed those exposed brick walls and glossy hardwood floors that made him imagine himself lounging with a cold drink after work. The building had been standing for over a century, 4 stories tall on a tree-lined street in a neighborhood teetering between gentrified and still holding on to its working-class roots. He met the landlord, a guy named Mr. Chin, who owned a handful of properties nearby, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The apartment was on the 3rd floor, up a narrow staircase that moaned under each step. Chen unlocked the door and gestured for Caleb to step inside. The apartment was exactly what the photos promised. Tall ceilings with original crown molding, big windows letting in natural light despite the gray drizzle outside, a small but updated kitchen, and a bathroom with vintage tiles that had recently been refreshed. And, of course, that exposed brick wall in the living area. Built in 1892, Chen said as they walked around. Used to be a single-family home, flipped into apartments in the 70s. Solid construction, good bones. You won't find another spot like this for the price. Caleb paused in the bedroom, noticing the ceiling was lower than the rest of the apartment. The plaster had a slightly different texture, too. "What's above me?" he asked. Chen followed his gaze. "Nothing. That's the roof. You're on the top floor." Caleb frowned. He had clearly seen another level from the outside. "The 4th floor? What about it?" Chen waved it off casually. "Attic space. Sealed. Not part of any unit. No access." There was something in the way he said it that rubbed Caleb the wrong way. But the apartment ticked all his boxes. He signed the lease that very afternoon. Moving in was brutal. Caleb didn't have much furniture, but lugging boxes up 3 flights of skinny stairs left him drained and sweaty. By evening, he had the essentials set up. Bed made, TV hooked up, kitchen stocked with groceries. He ordered a pizza, ate sitting on the floor amid unpacked boxes, and passed out early, muscles aching from the day's work. Around 2 a.m., he woke to a strange sound. Voices. Not shouting, just distinct, muffled conversation coming from somewhere above. Caleb sat up, disoriented, straining to place the source. 2 voices, he realized. One agitated, the other calm, almost soothing. The conversation went on for a few minutes before fading into the background. He stared at the ceiling. Chen had said there was nothing up there, just attic space. Maybe the sound was carrying from another apartment. Old buildings did weird stuff with acoustics. Caleb told himself that was it, and eventually went back to sleep. But the voices returned the next night. Same time, Same muffled quality. This time, he got out of bed and stood directly beneath the ceiling. It was definitely coming from above, from the space between his ceiling and the roof. He rapped on the ceiling. The sound cut off instantly, like someone had flipped a switch. Over the next week, it became a pattern. Every night between 2 and 3 a.m., the same muffled conversation played out. Caleb could never make out the words, just the cadence and tone. He mentioned it to Mr. Chen when calling about a leaky faucet. The landlord brushed it off. No attic access. No one could be up there. Maybe it's street noise or the neighbors. Old buildings make noise. You'll get used to it. Caleb didn't get used to it. The voices were too distinct, too consistent. He started recording them on his phone. Played back during the day, they were faint but audible. He tried cleaning up the audio to pick out words, but it was too muddled. Still, he knew two people were talking. 3 weeks after moving in, everything changed. Instead of the muffled chat, Caleb woke up to a single voice. A woman. And for the first time, he could clearly make out her words. "Help me. Please, someone help me." He bolted upright, heart racing. "Hello?" he called into the ceiling. "Please, I'm trapped. Help me, please." It wasn't a recording or his imagination. Someone, somewhere above him, was begging for help. Caleb grabbed his phone and called 911. The dispatcher sounded skeptical, asking him to repeat himself a couple of times. "Sir, is someone in your apartment?" "No, above my apartment, in the attic. I can hear her screaming for help." The dispatcher promised someone would be sent to check it out. Caleb threw on clothes and raced downstairs to meet 2 officers outside. They looked doubtful, but agreed to follow him upstairs. In his bedroom, they listened. Silence. "She was just here," Caleb insisted. "Only 10 minutes ago, crying for help." The officers exchanged looks. "Sir, your landlord says there's no attic access. No way someone could be up there. We'll check the apartment, closets, anything." They did, but found nothing. Once they left, Caleb sat on the bed, shaken. Had he imagined it? Was he losing it? But the voice had been real, desperate, pleading. He dug into the building's history online. Most records were boring. Permits, ownership changes, nothing alarming. Then, tucked in a local news archive, he found something chilling. 15 years ago, a woman named Jennifer C.S. went missing after neighbors reported hearing a loud argument. Police had searched the building but found nothing. Her boyfriend at the time claimed she left and never came back. He was questioned but never charged. The case went cold. Caleb felt his stomach twist. He called Mr. Chen the next morning about the building's past. Chen was evasive, but when Caleb mentioned Jennifer C.S., there was a long pause. "That was a long time ago. Police found nothing. Nothing to find," Chen said finally. "What unit did she live in?" Caleb pressed. "3rd floor. The unit you're renting now," Chen admitted. Caleb's head spun. "And you didn't think to mention a woman disappeared from this apartment?" "She didn't disappear from here. She left. Police confirmed it. The apartment's been rented many times since. Old building sounds, that's all you're hearing," Chen said defensively. But Caleb knew better. The voice had been real. And now he knew who it belonged to. Caleb spent the rest of the day inspecting every corner of his apartment. He crawled into the bedroom closet, running his hands along the back wall. Something didn't sit right. The wall seemed slightly off, misaligned with the rest of the room. There should have been roughly 2 more feet of space. He tapped the plaster. Hollow. With a butter knife, he pried at the edges, careful not to make a mess. A section of drywall loosened, revealing a narrow gap behind it. Caleb's pulse quickened. Squinting, he traced the outline of a hidden opening, an attic access sealed over and masked behind the closet. Heart hammering, he grabbed a flashlight and carefully peeled away more drywall until the hole was big enough to squeeze through. He crawled in, the narrow passage forcing him into a near-crawl position. The space slanted steeply upward, more like a crawlway than stairs. Every breath stirred up dust. The air smelled old, musty, and decayed. At the top, he found a tiny attic space, barely tall enough to stand. Rafters and old insulation filled most of the area. The beam of his flashlight swept across emptiness until he spotted a corner cloaked in shadows. Beneath yellowed newspapers and rotted fabric lay something that stopped him cold. A single woman's shoe. Next to it, partially hidden beneath debris, a skeletal outline. Human bones. Caleb's stomach lurched. He scrambled backward, flashlight clattering to the floor, plunging the attic into darkness. Hands trembling, he dialed 911 again, voice shaking. This time, the dispatcher believed him. Within the hour, police, crime scene investigators, and detectives swarmed his apartment. They documented the hidden entry, the attic space, and the remains concealed there for 15 years. DNA testing confirmed what Caleb already suspected. The bones belonged to Jennifer C.S. She hadn't left the building that night. Her boyfriend had killed her during the argument, hidden her body in the attic, sealed the access, and covered it all with renovations. He had moved out afterward, leaving subsequent tenants completely unaware. Jennifer had been trapped, calling for help that never came. Until Caleb listened. The boyfriend, now living under a new identity in another state, was arrested and charged with murder. Local news covered the story. 15-year-old cold case solved after a new tenant reported cries for help. Reports focused on forensic evidence and how the body remained hidden for so long, but none mentioned Caleb's crucial role. None acknowledged that he had actually heard Jennifer's voice. Caleb couldn't stay in that apartment. The thought of what had been hidden above him, what a woman had suffered in silence, made it impossible. Mr. Chen tried to hold Caleb's security deposit, citing breach of lease, but Caleb threatened to take the full story public. Within days, the landlord relented, returning the money. Caleb moved into a modern building. Concrete walls, no creaky floors, no century-old secrets. Yet the experience haunted him. He thought constantly of Jennifer C.S., imagining how long she must have been trapped before she died, wondering how many tenants had slept beneath her remains without realizing. He replayed the memory of her voice, persistent and desperate, night after night. He wondered if he was the first to hear her, or if previous tenants had simply dismissed the sounds as old building noises, like Mr. Chen had suggested. How many nights had she called for help before someone finally listened? The building was eventually sold. Caleb learned that the third-floor unit was gutted and renovated. Whatever presence lingered there seemed to have moved on. But Caleb knew the truth. Some voices refuse to be silenced. Some mysteries demand resolution. And sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to believe. One person willing to investigate when others turn away. One person who acts as the bridge between the voiceless and justice. One person who brings light into darkness, no matter how terrifying the shadows may be. Caleb thought about Jennifer every time he walked past a brownstone on the street. He thought about the cries that had finally reached him, guiding him to uncover the hidden truth. That attic, once sealed and silent, was now a place of closure. A tragedy solved because someone listened, because someone acted. Though he moved on with his life, the lesson stuck. Caleb didn't just learn to be cautious in old buildings, he learned the weight of paying attention, the responsibility of noticing what others ignore. And somewhere deep down, he felt a strange solace. That in the end, a voice that had been unheard for 15 years finally got its justice. Even in the modern building he now called home, he sometimes paused at night, listening to the silence around him, reminded of the attic, the shoe, the bones, and that faint, desperate voice that had changed everything. It had been terrifying, but it had also been proof that paying attention, following instinct, and believing, even when it seemed impossible, could bring light to places long buried in darkness. Some voices never fade. Some mysteries cannot rest until acknowledged. And Caleb, in that quiet apartment far from the brownstone, knew that he had been the one to answer the call. Story 4. Lily had been watching kids since she was 14. Now, at 21, she figured she was practically a pro. She'd handled messy toddlers, scraped knees, minor burns, blackouts, and even a small kitchen fire. Nothing shook her. So, when the Morgans asked if she could watch Emma and Jacob for the weekend while they went to a family wedding out of state, she didn't hesitate. She'd babysat them before. They were polite, smart kids, and the Morgans tipped well. Their house was a typical 1980s suburban split level. 3 bedrooms upstairs, a living and dining area on the main floor, and a finished basement packed with toys. The street was quiet, the kind where neighbors waved from their porches and kids rode bikes until it got dark. Lily arrived Friday evening, catching the parents just as they were zipping up suitcases. Mrs. Morgan went through the usual rundown. Bedtime at 8:30, no sugary snacks after dinner, emergency contacts taped to the fridge. She reminded Lily the master bedroom was off limits, but she could crash in the guest room on the main floor. One thing, Mrs. Morgan added while Mr. Morgan lugged the last suitcase. The kids have been having nightmares lately. They might wake up scared. Just reassure them, okay? Lily nodded. Nightmares were normal. Emma was 6, Jacob 8. Right in the prime age for big imaginations and irrational fears. Anything specific? Lily asked. Mrs. Morgan hesitated, glancing at her husband. They keep talking about someone in the hallway, a tall man. Says he watches them at night. Lily smiled gently. There's no one there. Probably just overactive imaginations. Hallways can look scary in the dark. She reassured them she could handle it. Imaginary monsters were part of the job. After the parents left, Lily spent the evening playing board games with the kids. They laughed, joked, and played just like any normal children. When 8:30 rolled around, she guided them upstairs. They brushed teeth, changed into pajamas, and climbed into bed without complaint. But as she turned to leave Emma's room, the little girl grabbed her arm. Keep the hallway light on, Emma whispered, and leave our doors open. Of course, Lily said, making a mental note. And don't go upstairs after we're asleep, Jacob said from his doorway, clutching a stuffed dinosaur. Lily kept her face neutral. Who's up there? Jacob pointed toward the top of the stairs leading to the master bedroom and the spare room. The tall man. He stands there. Doesn't like being watched. Emma nodded. No face, just a shape, taller than Daddy. A small chill ran down Lily's spine, but she pushed it aside. Children had vivid imaginations. Shadows could look like monsters in long hallways. There's no tall man, she said softly. Just shadows from outside. Only the 3 of us are in this house. You're safe. She tucked Emma in and gave Jacob a reassuring smile. Try to sleep. I'll be right downstairs if you need anything. She left the doors open, the hallway light on, and settled on the couch with her laptop. Planning to catch up on some coursework, she tried to focus, but around 10, she heard footsteps upstairs. Small, careful footsteps. She climbed the stairs and found Jacob standing in the hallway, staring at the upper staircase. "Jacob, what's wrong?" she asked. "He's here," he whispered. "At the top of the stairs." Lily followed his gaze. The staircase was dark. She hadn't turned on the light. The outline of the stairs was visible, nothing else. "There's no one there, sweetie. Let's get you back to bed." She took his hand, but he resisted. "Look, he's there!" Lily squinted into the darkness. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw a shadow, darker than the surrounding darkness. Tall, still. But when she blinked, it vanished. "Shadows," she murmured firmly. "Just tricks of the light." She led him back to bed, staying until he fell asleep, nearly half an hour later. Downstairs, she tried to focus again. Something about Jacob's certainty unsettled her. She told herself it was nothing. She was too old to be spooked by kid stories. Around midnight, she heard it again. Not the kids, something else. A soft, dragging sound, like furniture being shifted on carpet. She muted her laptop and listened. The sound came from upstairs. She checked the bedrooms, both kids asleep. The dragging continued. Lily's gut tightened. Responsibility was hers. If something had fallen, an animal got in, or a window was open, she needed to check. She found the light switch, flicked it on, and revealed the stairs and short hallway. Nothing seemed out of place. 2 doors at the end, master and spare. She checked the spare first. Empty, just storage boxes and an exercise bike. The master room next. Door turned knob, pushed open. Normal. Bed neatly made, family photos on dressers, curtains drawn. Foolish, she thought, imagining things. Then she turned toward the stairs and froze. At the far end of the hallway, a shadow. Not like a regular shadow. Tall, impossibly tall, human-shaped, but completely black. No features, no face. Still. Watching. Her breath caught. Blinked. Still there. Taller than any person should be, head nearly touching the ceiling. "Hello?" she whispered. Nothing. Lily backed up carefully, keeping her eyes on it. Step by step, to the bottom of the upper stairs. Step by step. Still nothing. She considered running, but the idea of turning her back filled her with dread. Finally, at the bottom, she looked back. Shadow gone. Empty hallway, closed doors. Hands shaking, she almost called the Morgans, but what could she say? "I saw a shadow?" Checked the kids, asleep. She turned on every light downstairs, convincing herself shadows can play tricks, that the kids' stories had primed her mind. Then she heard the screaming, both children, at the same time. Lily ran upstairs. Emma and Jacob sat up in bed, pointing at the hallway. "He's here!" Emma yelled. "In the hallway!" And there it was. Shadow, impossibly tall, impossibly black, moving slowly toward Emma's room. Lily didn't think. She put herself in front of Emma's door. "Get away from them!" she shouted. It paused. The hallway was thick, cold, oppressive. Then, slowly, the shadow dissolved, like smoke in air. Within seconds, it was gone. Emma and Jacob crying, Lily gathered them, brought them downstairs. All lights on, a movie playing. She stayed awake, watching the stairs, watching the hallways. It never came back. Morning crept in. When the Morgans returned Sunday afternoon, The kids told everything. Mrs. Morgan pulled Lily aside quietly. "You saw it?" Lily nodded. "Twice." "I thought it was just imagination, but it was real." Mrs. Morgan closed her eyes. "We've seen it too. 3 times this month. We didn't want to believe it." The Morgans paid her double and said she didn't need to babysit again. They were moving. Whatever lived in that house, they weren't sticking around. Lily never babysat there again. Word was, the house stayed empty for months, eventually sold to a young couple. Sometimes Lily wonders if they've seen it, felt the cold, seen the shape. Some houses hold things you can't explain. Sometimes the only smart move is to leave and never look back. Weeks passed, but Lily couldn't shake the memory of that shadow. She kept thinking about the new family that moved into the Morgans' old house. Did they notice it? Did they feel that unnatural chill creeping down the hallway at night? She tried to push it out of her mind, but sometimes at night, when she was alone in her apartment, she swore she could feel it just out of the corner of her eye. A reminder that some things refuse to stay hidden. Lily's own home felt different after that weekend. She double-checked every closet, every dark corner. She realized how easy it was to dismiss strange feelings until they hit you too close to home. She didn't babysit any big houses after that. Too many stories, too many shadows. She stuck to small apartments or familiar families. Months later, she got a call from a neighbor of the Morgans. Apparently, the new tenants had noticed strange things themselves. Furniture moved slightly on its own. The temperature would drop sharply near the staircase, and sometimes they'd hear dragging sounds late at night. Lily didn't know if they'd actually seen the tall shadow, but the reports matched too closely. It made her stomach turn. The house hadn't changed, only the people living there. One night, curiosity gnawed at her. She drove past the house on a quiet street. From the curb, it looked normal, perfectly still, suburban. Lights on in a few rooms. She imagined the kids asleep upstairs, unaware of what might be lingering just beyond the bedroom doors. She felt a shiver, took a deep breath, and drove away. Lily couldn't stop thinking about what that shadow might want. Was it tied to the kids? Was it drawn to fear? Was it always there, waiting for someone to notice? She replayed the weekend in her head over and over, the way it appeared, how it paused, the oppressive cold. It wasn't a trick of the imagination. She had felt its presence. She knew that for sure. She decided to talk to a friend, Mark, a skeptic who worked nights as a security consultant. "You're imagining things," he said, chuckling. "Kids' stories, shadows, old house noises, that's all." "No, Mark," Lily said, frustration rising. "You don't understand. I saw it. Twice. Not in my head. It was real. Taller than anyone should be. Solid black. Watching." He paused. "Okay, let's assume I believe you. Why would a shadow be moving around a house?" "I don't know," she admitted. "It's like it's attached to the house or the kids. It shows up when they're scared. But it doesn't hurt them. It just watches." Mark didn't respond. Lily could tell he was debating whether she had lost it or whether something truly strange was going on. Another weekend, Lily babysat for a smaller house, nothing fancy. She made herself stay vigilant, even for small noises. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against a window reminded her of the Morgan house. She kept a notebook, documenting odd events in her mind. Mostly harmless, small shadows, fleeting shapes, but each one reminded her how real the experience had been. Weeks later, she got a cryptic message from one of the new tenants at the Morgan house. They didn't know she had babysat there. It simply said, "We see it too. Upstairs. At night. Watching." Her heart jumped. they were seeing the same thing. She wanted to reply, to warn them, but her hands shook. What could she say? How could she explain the impossibility of the figure? She didn't reply. She sat back, staring at the message, realizing some presences don't care about reason, about explanations. Lily started noticing shadows elsewhere after that. In her own apartment, long hallways at work, even at her friend's place. Each time, she caught a movement that vanished the moment she focused on it. Something primal, instinctual, told her not to ignore it. But she also knew that most people would write it off as paranoia, childhood fears, imagination. One night, she dreamt of the tall shadow. She was in the Morgan house, and the figure appeared at the end of the hallway. This time, she didn't run. She watched it slowly approach, not attacking, not speaking, just there. She felt no fear in the dream, only a strange, icy presence, like it existed outside the world she knew. She woke sweating, heart racing, certain she could still feel it in the room. Months passed. Lily didn't babysit for families with large hallways anymore. She avoided houses with basements or attics, any place that could hide things you weren't meant to see. Yet the Morgan house lingered in her mind. She knew that no matter who lived there, no matter what lights were left on, some presence would remain. Shadows aren't bound by doors or walls. They watch. They wait. Lily often wondered, had the shadow followed her? Was it tied to her somehow for witnessing it? Or was it simply bound to that house, a shape waiting for the next generation of children to notice it? She didn't know. And maybe she didn't want to. Some mysteries are safer left unsolved. The last she heard, the new tenants had moved out, citing constant strange sounds and an eerie feeling in the hallway. The house remained empty for months, eventually sold to another family. She wondered if they noticed anything, if they'd stare down the hallway at night and feel that unnatural weight, that chill crawling over the skin. She imagined them tiptoeing past the stairwell, hearts hammering, seeing the impossible silhouette at the far end, silently watching. Lily told herself she'd never babysit in that neighborhood again. She avoided long, dark hallways, but she knew deep down that some presences don't vanish, that shadows in old houses don't need eyes or mouths to be real. Sometimes, when she closed her eyes at night, she could see it again. The tall, faceless figure standing still, perfectly silent, colder than the air around her. Not attacking, not moving, just observing, waiting, watching. And she understood something she hadn't before. Some things in the world cannot be explained, cannot be rationalized. Some presences simply exist, and the only safe thing to do is respect them, keep distance, and never, ever look back. Some houses hold what cannot be named. Some shadows refuse to leave. And some lessons, like the one Lily learned that weekend, linger far longer than the fear of children's nightmares ever could. Story 5. Wyatt had been working the late-night shift at his family's corner store for half a year. It wasn't glamorous, not by a long shot, but it covered his rent and left him free during the day to chase his real passion, photography. The shop sat at a quiet intersection in a blue-collar neighborhood where things slowed to almost nothing after midnight. Most nights, Wyatt's customers were predictable. Tired cabbies grabbing coffee, nurses and hospital staff swinging by after their shifts, or the occasional insomniac hunting snacks. It was boring, safe, until it wasn't. The first night he noticed him was a late Tuesday in late September. Wyatt was restocking cigarette packs behind the counter when the door chime rang at exactly 2 a.m. He looked up to see a man walk in, probably in his 40s, slim, average height, wearing a dark jacket and faded jeans. Nothing immediately alarming, except for his eyes. They were pale, almost gray, and when they locked onto Wyatt, the gaze lingered longer than felt natural. The man wandered slowly through the store, picked up a bag of pretzels, a bottle of water, and a stick of gum, then set them on the counter without saying a word. Wyatt rang it up. $7.43. The man paid exact change and left. The whole exchange barely took 2 minutes, but Wyatt couldn't shake the feeling it left behind. The stare, the silence, the deliberate way he moved, it all felt calculated. Wyatt shrugged it off. Strange customers were part of the late-night grind, but then he came back. The next night, same time, same items. Wyatt tried chatting. Rough night? But the man just stared and left with his bag, wordless. Night 3, Wyatt recognized him immediately. Same routine, but this time the man spoke. "You work here every night?" His voice was soft, almost gentle. "Tuesday through Saturday, midnight to 8, Wyatt said. The man nodded slowly, absorbing the information. "You're always alone," he remarked. Wyatt felt a flicker of unease. "Sometimes, yeah," he said cautiously. "Why?" The man didn't answer. He paid and walked out, but instead of disappearing down the street, he crossed to the broken streetlight across the corner and stood in the shadows, watching the store. Minutes passed before he left. Wyatt's stomach churned. After his shift, he told Pam, the day manager who'd been at the store for 2 decades. "There's a guy outside, watching." Pam frowned. "Did you get a good look at him?" Wyatt described the man as best he could. Pam pulled up the security footage from that night, froze the frame. She stared at the screen for a long moment. "I've seen him before," she murmured. "Used to come in a couple years back, then disappeared. Forgot all about him until now." She looked at Wyatt seriously. "Be careful. Something about that guy always felt off. Keep your phone on you, and if it feels wrong, call the cops immediately." The visits continued. Same time, same items. But each night, he lingered a little longer. Small talk emerged. "Where are you from? What do you do besides work here?" Wyatt gave vague answers, instinctively keeping distance, but the man's persistence never wavered. "You seem like a good kid," he said one night. "Not many people your age work nights. Shows character." The compliment should have been normal, but something about it twisted Wyatt's gut. Soon, the comments turned sharper. "Must be scary being here alone. Anyone could walk in. You wouldn't be able to do much. I bet you think about it sometimes. What you'd do if someone came in with bad intentions." Wyatt tried to stay professional, but the words burrowed into him. He started double-checking the store's security setup. The panic button under the counter, the metal bat in the back room, the locks on every door. One Thursday in mid-October, the man arrived agitated. He paced instead of heading straight for his usual items. Wyatt kept a hand near the panic button. The man stopped at the counter, empty-handed. "Do you know what it's like?" he asked, locking Wyatt in with those pale, icy eyes. "To do something terrible and never be able to take it back?" Wyatt's throat went dry. "Everyone has regrets," he said cautiously. The man shook his head. "Not regrets. Things that change you. Things you can never uncross. Things you do that leave a mark." Wyatt wanted him out, wanted to hit the panic alarm, but the intensity pinned him. "I don't know what you're talking about," Wyatt said. "I know what it's like to be truly alone," the man continued. "Alone with thoughts that terrify you. To wonder if you're capable of things you never imagined." His gaze sharpened. "You're alone here every night. Ever wonder if someone might take advantage of that? I think you should leave, Wyatt said, steadying his voice. I'm not threatening you, just talking. That's what people do, right? He picked up a candy bar and placed it on the counter. Ring this up. Wyatt's hands shook as he scanned it. The man paid, grabbed the candy, and walked toward the door. He paused, turned back. You're a good listener. Not many people really listen anymore. Wyatt locked the door as soon as he left, called Pam, and woke her. She told him to call the police. Wyatt waited, heart pounding, listening to the quiet hum of the empty store. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, getting closer, but in that moment, the air felt thick, almost suffocating. He glanced at the door, then at the counter where the man had stood not 10 minutes earlier. Tuesday came again, exactly at 2 a.m., and the door chimed. Wyatt froze. The man was back. But this time, he didn't just stroll in and head for the usual items. He turned, slowly, and locked the door behind him. Wyatt's hand instinctively went to the panic button. Unlock the door, the man said, his voice low but edged with urgency. I just need to talk. Really talk. No cops this time. Unlock the door or I'm hitting this, Wyatt said, finger hovering over the alarm. The man sighed, stepping closer. You don't understand. I need to get this off my chest. I've been carrying it too long. I can't anymore. I've done things. Terrible things. Things I see every time I close my eyes. Things I hate myself for. His voice cracked. Wyatt pressed the panic button. No alarm yet, but he knew the cops were on their way. He needed to keep the man talking, keep him distracted. What kind of things? Wyatt asked cautiously. The man began pacing, hands moving, eyes darting. Break-ins, houses with people sleeping. I'd watch them first, learn their routines, figure out when they were vulnerable. Sometimes I'd just take stuff, money, electronics. But sometimes... He stopped, looking Wyatt dead in the eye. Sometimes I did more than steal. Wyatt felt his stomach churn. Why are you telling me this? The man let out a bitter laugh. Because you seem real. Everyone else just goes through the motions. But you? I've been watching you. You notice. You understand what it's like to be alone in the dark, wondering what's lurking just beyond your sight. He stepped closer. I've been watching your store for weeks, not just when I came in. I know your schedule. I know you lock the back at 12:30. I know your break is at 4. I know everything about you. The wail of approaching sirens froze him mid-step. Rage replaced the anguish on his face. You called them! You weren't listening! You were stalling! Wyatt grabbed the baseball bat behind the counter, backing up. Stay back! The man glanced toward the windows as red and blue lights reflected across the street, then turned to Wyatt one last time. You don't understand. I was trying to confess, trying to finally do the right thing. But now they'll take me, and you'll never know the rest. You'll never know about the others. Police officers burst through the door, guns drawn. Hands up! Get on the ground! The man dropped to his knees immediately, hands behind his head. Wyatt remained frozen, bat in hand, as officers swarmed. They cuffed the man and pulled him to his feet. As he was led outside, he glanced back at Wyatt one more time. The houses on Maple Street, you know, what they never found, he whispered. The next few hours were a blur. More cops arrived, detectives took statements, and security footage from the past weeks was reviewed frame by frame. When they ran his identification, Wyatt's unease solidified into dread. The man's name was Dennis Cortland. Criminal record? Burglary, breaking and entering, assault. He'd been released from county jail 8 months prior after a home invasion where the residents were present. He was supposed to attend mandatory counseling, but had stopped weeks ago. Detectives asked Wyatt to recount every word Dennis had said. Confessions about break-ins, mentions of Maple Street, implications of more crimes he hadn't revealed. Wyatt's voice trembled as he retold it. Calls went out to other departments to cross-check unsolved burglaries and home invasions. The investigators found that Dennis's claims lined up with several cold cases. Items from a storage unit registered to him matched stolen property from multiple incidents over the last 2 years. There were hundreds of photographs, houses, windows, unaware people inside. Wyatt himself wasn't photographed, but the implications were chilling. Dennis had been planning, watching, and Wyatt could have been next. Wyatt stopped working late shifts. His father didn't argue. They hired someone else for nights, and Wyatt moved to days. He was never alone again. But the experience changed him. He became hyper-aware of who was around him, scanning for pale blue eyes, noting intensity in strangers' gazes, double-checking locks, varying his routines. He no longer felt safe where he couldn't see everyone around him. Dennis never finished his full confession. He took a plea deal that sent him back to prison for 8 years, but part of it included providing information on additional crimes, helping to close 6 cold cases. Wyatt knows, though, there are things Dennis never revealed. Secrets locked away behind bars. And on quiet nights, when sleep refuses to come, Wyatt thinks about what might have happened if he hadn't pressed that panic button. If he'd let Dennis continue. If those pale eyes had decided the confession wasn't enough. Wyatt shudders at the thought. Some confessions, he has learned, are better left incomplete. Some truths aren't worth uncovering. Story 6. Eleanor always considered herself the practical type. At 24, she worked as a medical lab tech, a job that demanded logic and a steady head, and she approached life the same way. When she found a studio to rent in an old Victorian that had been split into 4 apartments, she didn't sweat the building's age or history. Price, location close to the hospital, and pet-friendly rules mattered more. Her cat, Oliver, was coming along, so that sealed the deal. The house, built in the early 1900s, towered 3 stories with a turret, intricate wood carvings, and all those ornate touches modern construction no longer bothered with. Her unit was on the first floor, a cozy studio with tall windows, polished hardwood floors, and a kitchen updated in the 90s. Everything was great, except one odd feature: a door tucked in the corner of the main room that led to the basement. Mr. Vasquez, the landlord, an older man with a calm, slow way about him, explained that the basement was shared for storage among the tenants. She could keep a few boxes down there if she wanted, but the door should stay locked when not in use. The stairs are steep, and it's just bare concrete with pipes and old shelves. Not much to see, he said. Eleanor thanked him and decided she'd avoid the basement altogether. She didn't own much anyway, and the thought of climbing dark, narrow stairs had zero appeal. She moved in on a Saturday, unpacked all day, and arranged her things. Oliver scouted every corner before claiming a sunny patch by the window for his naps. By evening, she felt settled, ready to enjoy her new place. That first night, she made sure the basement door was locked and headed to bed. Around 3 a.m., Oliver woke her, hissing furiously, tail puffed, eyes fixed on the basement door. Bleary-eyed, Eleanor flicked on her bedside lamp and stared at it. The door was ajar, not wide open, just a thin line of darkness peeking through. She froze. She remembered locking it. Deadbolt clicked perfectly. Certain. Slowly, she got out of bed and approached. Her stomach churned. She closed it firmly, turned the deadbolt, testing it again. Oliver kept hissing for a few more minutes before he settled back down. She returned to bed but couldn't sleep. Morning brought relief. The door was still locked. Maybe she hadn't turned it all the way the night before. Old houses shifted. Doors moved on their own. Simple. But the next night, the same thing happened. Eleanor double-checked the deadbolt before bed. Around 2:30 a.m., Oliver hissed again. The door was wide open. She inspected the lock. It worked perfectly. Somehow, it had unlocked itself. She closed it, locked it again, and wedged a chair against it. That night, the door stayed shut. Over the following week, she developed a routine. Lock the door, test the bolt, pile furniture in front. Some nights it held. Other nights, she woke to find the chair shoved aside, door open like an invisible hand had moved it. She mentioned it to her upstairs neighbor, a grad student named Marcus. "Oh yeah, those basement doors are weird. Mine opens sometimes too. Just old locks and the house settling. I just leave mine open, less hassle." Eleanor wasn't about to leave it open. The darkness beyond that door, the icy draft seeping from below, it unsettled her. She bought a new, heavy-duty deadbolt and installed it herself. That night, she locked it, tested it 3 times, and went to bed feeling confident. At 1 a.m., Oliver hissed again. The door was wide open. The new deadbolt was still fully engaged. Heart hammering, Eleanor grabbed her phone and turned on the flashlight, aiming it at the staircase leading down. Cold air wafted upward, smelling of mildew, decay, and something else. Something off, organic. "Hello?" she whispered, voice trembling. Silence. Only her breath and Oliver's hiss. She forced herself forward, flashlight shaking. The basement looked exactly as Mr. Vasquez described. Concrete floor, exposed pipes, stacked boxes. Nothing moved. Nothing made a sound. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, climbing toward her. She stumbled backward over Oliver. The stairs were empty, but the sound was real. Someone, or something, was ascending. She slammed the door, pressing her weight against it, fumbling with the lock. The footsteps reached the top. She could feel a presence pressing against the other side. The lock had failed before. It might fail again. She dragged her dresser in front, piled boxes, her nightstand, and a chair, forming a barricade. Retreating to the far corner with Oliver in her arms, she waited for dawn. The door didn't budge, but sleep refused her. Morning came, and she called Mr. Vasquez. Her voice shook. "The basement door keeps opening. Something's down there. I heard steps." There was a long pause. His tone shifted, cautious now. "What kind of steps?" "Someone walking up the stairs, but no one was there." Another pause. "Miss Eleanor, I need to tell you something about that basement." He arrived that afternoon, sitting at her small kitchen table, voice low. 20 years ago, before I split the house into apartments, a woman named Margaret Brennan lived here. Alone. Her husband had passed. She was in her 80s, developing dementia. One winter night, she opened the basement door, confused, and fell down the stairs. No one found her for 3 days. She died there. Eleanor felt her stomach twist. Mr. Vasquez continued, quietly. "I bought the house from her estate, renovated, divided into apartments. I've owned it 18 years. Most tenants never have problems. but some. He gestured to the barricade. Some report doors opening, strange cold air, weird noises. I assumed it was just the house settling. Maybe it's more. She wanted to leave immediately, but her lease was binding. She arranged another solution. Marcus knew someone who dealt with spiritual disturbances, a woman named Carmen. Carmen arrived Thursday evening, standing long at the basement door, eyes closed, hand pressed to the wood. "She's confused," Carmen said at last. "Doesn't understand where she is or why she can't leave. She keeps trying to go back upstairs, but the stairs don't lead where they used to. Everything is different now." She performed a cleansing, burning sage, speaking words Eleanor didn't recognize, leaving small bundles of herbs at the threshold. "I've told her this is your home, but she's stubborn. May take time for her to accept." She handed Eleanor a small cloth bag of salt and herbs. "Keep this by the door. It will help." Carmen hesitated. "Be compassionate. She's frightened, lost. She died alone and in pain. Maybe that's why she lingers." That night, Eleanor did something absurd, yet necessary. She stood at the basement door and spoke into the darkness. "Margaret, if you're here, I want you to know this is my home now. I respect that you lived here, but you can't stay. Please move on. Find peace." She left flowers and water by the door, a small offering. For the first time in 2 weeks, the door stayed closed. Oliver watched quietly, calm. Morning revealed the water gone, likely evaporated, she told herself. Over the following days, Eleanor kept up her ritual. Fresh flowers once a week, a glass of water every few days. The chill from the basement stopped drifting into her apartment, and the sense of being watched faded. The oppressive heaviness lifted, leaving the old Victorian feeling like a home instead of a trap. Slowly, she moved the furniture back into its proper places, removing the barricade entirely. She still locked the basement door, but fear no longer gripped her every time she passed it. Weeks turned into months, and the apartment became her sanctuary. Oliver lounged lazily on the windowsill, sunlight streaming in, and Eleanor spent evenings with books, her laptop, or catching up on shows. She often glanced at the basement door, not with dread, but with a quiet acknowledgement, a subtle respect for the space below. She thought about Margaret Brennan and the life she'd lived, the confusion and fear that must have clouded her final moments. A woman who had lived and died in the house she now called home, trying desperately to navigate a world that had changed beyond recognition. One Saturday morning, she ran into Carmen at a coffee shop. The older woman smiled warmly. "How's it going? Is she settled?" "Quiet," Eleanor replied. "Peaceful. Whatever was there seems to have moved on." "Sometimes," Carmen said, "all spirits need is acknowledgement. Someone to see them, to remember them, to treat them with dignity, even in death. You gave her that. You let her know she wasn't forgotten." Eleanor nodded, stirring her coffee. She thought about Margaret often after that. A woman whose final days had been marked by confusion and solitude, now remembered and respected. She had left small offerings, spoken kind words into the darkness, and in doing so, created a bridge between the living and the dead. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt lived in, cared for, and safe. Life resumed its normal rhythm. Eleanor's routine at the hospital was unchanged, but coming home was no longer fraught with unease. She could go about her day without glancing nervously at shadows or double-checking locks at odd hours. The old Victorian had quirks, but they no longer carried the weight of fear. She even began inviting friends over for small gatherings, showing off the tall windows, the turret, and the charm that had originally drawn her in. Every so often, she would leave fresh flowers or a little glass of water by the basement door, more out of habit than necessity. She would whisper, "Hope you're at peace, Margaret," before heading out or to bed. Oliver sometimes watched the door, ears pricked, but no hissing, no fear. It was as if they both understood the quiet pact they'd made with the past. Seasons changed. Winter gave way to spring, and spring to summer. Sunlight poured through the windows in long golden streams, catching dust motes that danced lazily in the air. Eleanor kept to her schedule, but she noticed herself more attuned to the life in the apartment, the creak of the floorboards, the gentle hum of pipes, even the faint sound of wind through the turret. Where once the basement door had represented fear, now it served as a reminder that life and death coexist in the same spaces, sometimes in ways you cannot fully see. Friends who came by commented on how cozy the apartment felt. "This place has character," one would say, gesturing to the woodwork or the turret, unaware of the deeper history. Eleanor would smile knowingly, not sharing all the details, but feeling a quiet satisfaction that she had transformed fear into respect, chaos into calm. Even at night, she no longer dreaded the hours when the apartment was still. Oliver would curl on the bed beside her, purring softly. The basement door remained locked, unthreatening, a silent witness to a history she now honored rather than feared. She would sometimes stand near it, placing a flower or adjusting a bundle of herbs, whispering small words of acknowledgement. "You're safe now. Thank you for letting me live here." Time passed, and the old Victorian became more than just a place to live. It became a home with layers of memory, some tragic, some beautiful. Eleanor felt connected to the house in a way that went beyond practicality or comfort. She understood the importance of acknowledging the lives that had come before, even those who had passed under difficult circumstances. The spirit of Margaret Brennan had moved on, and in that, Eleanor found a sense of closure she hadn't known she needed. She continued her work at the hospital, her life moving forward, but she carried the lessons of the Victorian with her. Compassion, even for those long gone, could change the energy of a place, could transform fear into peace. She told herself often that the world held more than what the eyes could see, and sometimes a simple act of kindness, even for the departed, was enough to restore balance. Years later, she still lived in the apartment, fully comfortable with its quirks and history. The flowers and water remained part of her routine, a quiet ritual of respect and remembrance. Friends marveled at the way she had made the space her own, blissfully unaware of the nights she had spent listening to empty stairs, heart hammering, Oliver hissing and warning. Eleanor had grown into the home, and in doing so, had grown herself. She learned to face fear, to act with compassion, and to respect boundaries that existed in both the physical and unseen worlds. The basement door, once a symbol of terror, had become a symbol of coexistence, a daily reminder of what can happen when fear is met with empathy and understanding. The old Victorian, with its turret, carved wood, and steep stairs leading to a locked basement, no longer felt haunted. It felt alive, layered with memories, respected and honored. Eleanor could walk past that door without a shiver, and Oliver would follow without a hiss, because the home they shared had been made whole. And sometimes, late at night, she would whisper into the darkness one last time, "Thank you for letting me be here. You're at peace now." In the quiet that followed, the house sighed contentedly, as if it, too, were grateful. Some doors, she realized, open for reasons beyond the physical. Some boundaries must be honored. And when treated with respect, even the most restless presences could find their way to peace. Story 7. Andrew was 26 when his Aunt Patricia hit him up for a favor, house-sitting her place for 3 weeks while she jetted off to Europe. Patricia's home was out in the sticks, 40 miles from the city, surrounded by sprawling farmland and dense woods. She had raised Andrew after his parents died in a car crash when he was 12, giving him a sense of stability when his life had gone sideways. So, when she asked, he didn't even hesitate. Remote work as a software developer made it a no-brainer. He could grind from anywhere with Wi-Fi. The thought of 3 weeks in the countryside, away from the constant hum of traffic and city chaos, sounded like heaven. The house itself was a 2-story colonial, built back in the 70s. Tucked down a long gravel driveway, it had that lived-in charm that only decades of care can bring. Photos of family lined the walls. Bookshelves sagged under the weight of novels and photo albums, and the kitchen still had the familiar yellow wallpaper Andrew remembered from his teen years. Patricia left a binder with detailed instructions for the house and garden, emergency contacts, and the number of her neighbor a mile down the road. Settling in was easy. He set up his laptop at the dining room table, kept his work hours, and spent evenings wandering the property. The peace was intoxicating after years in cramped city apartments. Nights were quiet, punctuated only by crickets and the occasional distant bark of a dog. He felt completely at ease, until the first note showed up. It was his 3rd morning there. Andrew came down to brew coffee and spotted a small scrap of paper on the kitchen counter. Torn from a notepad, it had 3 words scribbled in blue crayon in a childish hand. I see you. Confused, he picked it up. He'd been alone. Every door locked, every window secure. Maybe a neighbor's kid had been over before he arrived. Shrugging, he crumpled the note and tossed it. The next day, another scrap appeared. Don't leave me. This time, the chill in his chest was undeniable. Someone, or something, was definitely putting these notes there. He scoured the house, closets, cabinets, behind doors. Nothing. Empty. Alone. He tried calling Patricia, but she was overseas and hard to reach. Not wanting to stress her out with what sounded insane, he rigged a webcam in the kitchen to catch whoever was leaving the messages. He spent the next morning reviewing the footage. 8 hours of nothing but an empty kitchen, dimly lit by the stove light he'd left on. No movement, no intruder. Yet another note awaited him. You look tired. Andrew's hands trembled as he held it. Someone had been watching, observing him, knowing he was tired, which meant they had seen him recently. But the cameras recorded nothing. Every window, every door, locked, secured. Impossible for anyone to have entered. The notes kept coming, each one more specific. I like your shirt. You talked on the phone today. Why are you scared? His sleep deteriorated. Every creak of the old house felt like footsteps, every shadow a lurking presence. He set up extra cameras, recording constantly. Nothing. Just him, moving through the house, cooking, working, trying to hold on to sanity. By the 8th day, he hit a note that shook him to his core. I used to live here. Andrew's brain spun. A child had lived here? Patricia had been alone for over 20 years. Before that, she lived with her late husband. No children. He called Patricia again, urgency in his voice. Did anyone else ever live in this house? He asked. There was a pause. Her voice was tight. Why are you asking? He explained the notes, the handwriting, the knowledge of his actions. Another long pause. Andrew, before your uncle and I bought the place, there was a little girl. She died here. 7 years old. Terrible accident. Her parents sold immediately after. I never told you because I didn't want to scare you. I'm sorry. Andrew's head spun. 7 years old. Notes in a child's handwriting. Real-time messages. Specific. Impossible. Ridiculous. Yet undeniable. That night, sleep was out of the question. He stayed in the living room, lights blazing, waiting for dawn. Eventually, exhaustion hit, and he dozed off in the armchair. He woke to a cold, light touch on his hand. A note had been placed in his palm while he slept. The handwriting was unmistakable. My name is Sarah. I have been alone so long. Please don't be scared. I just want someone to know I am still here. The room was empty. Gray morning light spilled across the floor, Oliver unperturbed by anything supernatural. Andrew's hand shook violently. The note hadn't floated from nowhere. It had been placed there. Something not alive, not human. Andrew spent the day combing through old records, determined to make sense of the notes. He dug through property deeds, local archives, and newspaper clippings, and finally unearthed a small obituary from 1990. Sarah Michelle Crawford, age 7, died in a tragic accident at her home. Survived by her parents, Robert and Linda Crawford. His stomach churned. Every note, every interaction, it all added up. This was Sarah. That evening, Andrew did something he never imagined. He grabbed a pen and a sheet of paper and wrote back. Sarah, my name is Andrew. I'm sorry you died. I'm sorry you've been alone. I'm not afraid. I just want to understand. He left the note on the kitchen counter and went to bed, though sleep felt impossible. Morning light revealed a new note in its place. Thank you for talking to me. No one has talked to me in so long. They ignore the noises I make, the doors I open. They pretend I'm not here. From that moment on, Andrew began leaving messages for Sarah daily. Notes about his own life, questions about hers. Small reassurances that she wasn't invisible to him. At first, it felt absurd, like pretending with an imaginary friend. But the responses were specific, deeply personal, and impossibly real. Sarah shared memories. Her favorite doll, Rosie. The games she played. How she had been chasing her cat when she fell. Her innocence and loneliness were heartbreaking. One evening, Andrew asked aloud, "Why are you still here?" The next morning, "I don't know how to leave. I called for Mommy after I fell, but no one came. Everything changed. Different people lived here. I tried to tell them I was here, but they couldn't hear me. Except you." Andrew sat frozen. A child, trapped between worlds, unheard for decades, finally reaching someone who would see her. He called Patricia, explaining everything. Skeptical at first, she softened as he read Sarah's notes aloud. "What should I do?" he asked. "How do I help her?" "She just needed someone to acknowledge her," Patricia said. "You've done that. You've let her know she matters." But Andrew wanted more. Over the next few days, he researched Sarah's family. He tracked down the cemetery where she was buried, 15 miles away. One sunny Saturday morning, he drove out and stood before her small headstone. Weathered but legible, it bore her name. He left flowers, speaking softly to a girl he'd never met. "Sarah, I know you're scared. I know you don't want to be alone. Your parents aren't here anymore. This house isn't yours. You don't have to stay trapped where you fell. There's somewhere else for you to go. Somewhere safe." Returning home, he found one final note, scrawled messily. "I can see them now. Mommy and Daddy. They're calling me. Thank you for helping me hear them. Goodbye, Andrew." It was the last message. No more notes appeared. The house felt lighter, as if a weight Andrew hadn't noticed had lifted. When Patricia came back from Europe, he told her everything. She walked through the house, nodding slowly. "It does feel different," she admitted. "Calmer, more peaceful." Andrew finished the 3-week house sit without incident. But before leaving, he returned to Sarah's grave, fresh flowers in hand, tidying the weeds that had grown around her stone. "I hope you found them," he whispered. "I hope you're not alone anymore." As he turned to leave, a sudden breeze stirred, even though the day had been still. And for a brief moment, he could have sworn he heard the faintest giggle of a child, light and free. Years later, Andrew sometimes thinks about Sarah. How long she had been trapped, unheard and unseen. How a simple act, acknowledgement, conversation, compassion, was enough to help her move on. He wonders how many other spirits linger, desperate for someone to notice, to treat them with kindness instead of fear. And he knows now that the veil between the living and the dead is thinner than most believe. Sometimes, all it takes is a note, a word, and a willingness to see the forgotten, to help them find their way home. Story 8. Natalie worked as an X-ray tech at St. Agnes Medical Center, a massive hospital campus on the city's outskirts. Her shifts were unpredictable. Sometimes she started before the sun came up, other times she was finishing charts and imaging reports well past midnight. After 6 years in the role, she had grown used to the exhaustion and erratic schedule. But there was one thing she never got comfortable with: the employee parking garage. 5 stories of concrete, shadowy corners, and flickering fluorescent lights that seemed to burn out every other week. Despite countless complaints from staff, the hospital hadn't upgraded anything. The budget never allowed it. Natalie usually tried to snag a spot on the 3rd floor, as close to the elevator as she could, feeling safer with a shorter walk. Daytime shifts were manageable. The garage was full, bustling, and less intimidating. Night shifts, though, were a different beast. Empty lanes echoed with every footstep, and shadows pooled into corners that seemed to hold their own secrets. She took precautions. Pepper spray hung from her keychain. Her keys were always clutched between fingers, ready as a makeshift weapon. She stayed aware of her surroundings, but the truth was, no amount of vigilance could completely erase the uneasy feeling that something bad could happen. It started about 3 weeks before the real fear began. Natalie had just wrapped a brutal 12-hour shift and stepped out into the garage after midnight. As she hit the 3rd floor, she noticed a car parked a few spaces down from hers, a dark sedan with the engine running. The driver sat inside, shadowed by the dim dashboard lights. Her stomach twisted. Probably nothing, she told herself. Someone waiting for a coworker, maybe. She walked fast, got into her car, locked the doors, and eased out of the space. Glancing in her rear view, the sedan was still there, engine humming, driver motionless. The next night, same thing. Same spot, same vehicle, engine idling. This time, Natalie noted the details. A dark blue Honda Accord, roughly 5 or 6 years old, license plate obscured by angle and shadow. Something about it felt off. She mentioned it casually to Dana, a coworker, as they swapped out their scrubs. "You should tell security," Dana said. "Maybe it's nothing, but better safe than sorry." That night, Natalie stopped by the security office. The guard on duty, a tired man in his 50s, scribbled her report but didn't seem too concerned. "Probably someone waiting for a spouse," he said. "We see it a lot. I'll have someone check it." Natalie left feeling dismissed. Back on the 3rd floor, relief washed over her. The car was gone. Maybe it really was harmless. Maybe the timing just happened to coincide with her shifts. But it wasn't harmless. 2 nights later, the car returned, parked across the garage this time,
facing the elevator. Engine running, driver inside. As she walked toward her car, the running lights flicked on, almost like a warning. Her hands shook as she fumbled with her keys. Heart hammering, she finally got in and started the engine, watching the sedan. The driver didn't move.
Over the next week, the pattern escalated. 4 more appearances. Twice beside her car, twice across the aisle facing the elevator. Each time, the sense of being watched was suffocating. Through the windshield glare, she could only make out the outline of a person. Male, she assumed, but uncertain. Natalie pressed security again, insisting on camera footage review. "Half our cameras aren't working," the guard admitted. "Budget cuts. But I'll file a request." She started mixing up her parking routine. 2nd floor some nights, 4th floor others, hoping to throw whoever it was off. But the sedan always showed up, tracking her movements, adjusting as if anticipating her every choice. For safety, she walked with co-workers when possible, but night shifts didn't always align. There were nights she had no choice but to navigate the echoing garage alone. Then came the night that made everything real. Finished at 2:30 a.m., she took the elevator to the 4th floor, hoping a new spot would break the pattern. Instead, the sedan was there, directly beside her car, engine running, driver inside. Barely enough room to squeeze in. Hands shaking, pepper spray ready, Natalie froze for a second. She could retreat, call security, wait for backup. But she was tired, frustrated, and angry that someone had been haunting her for weeks. She stepped forward cautiously, senses on high alert. As she approached, the sedan's engine revved. The driver was awake, aware. She tried to slip into the tight space, and then the car door opened. Panic surged. She bolted, sprinting toward the elevator, hearing heavy footsteps behind her. A man's voice called out, low and incomprehensible. Natalie slammed the elevator button repeatedly. The footsteps grew louder. She spun, pepper spray aimed at the approaching figure. A man in his 30s or 40s, dark jacket, jeans, face hidden under a low baseball cap. "Stay away from me!" she screamed, voice echoing through concrete walls. The man froze, hands raised. "I just want to talk." Calm, which made it worse. "Back off or I'll spray!" Her finger tightened on the trigger. He hesitated. "You don't understand. I've been trying to find the right time. I've been watching you." Her stomach dropped. Her worst fears were confirmed. He had been stalking her, mapping her routine, following her. The elevator arrived. Natalie backed up against her car, pepper spray ready. The man stepped forward. She squeezed the trigger. A stream hit him through the narrowing doors. He cried out. The elevator doors closed. Hyperventilating, Natalie rode down to the ground floor, ran straight to security. This time, they took action. 2 guards accompanied her back, empty lot, the sedan gone. They escorted her home. The following morning, hospital leadership reviewed all available security footage. Despite half the cameras being offline, enough angles had recorded the vehicle to identify it and capture part of the license plate. Within 2 days, the police had traced the car to Kevin Marsh, a recently terminated maintenance worker at the hospital. He had been fired 3 months earlier for inappropriate behavior toward female staff. When authorities searched Kevin's vehicle, Natalie's stomach sank. They found photographs of her, taken with a telephoto lens, printed copies of her work schedule, maps with her home circled, zip ties, duct tape, and even a knife. Kevin claimed he only wanted to talk, to explain why he'd been fired, insisting he wasn't dangerous. But the evidence suggested something far darker. He was promptly charged with stalking, criminal harassment, possession of weapons with intent, and violating a restraining order from another former female employee. Natalie took 2 weeks off to recover. When she returned, the hospital had finally acted on emergency funding for garage security upgrades. New lights were installed on every level. Cameras were repaired and activated. A guard was assigned to patrol the garage during all night shifts. As part of the arrangement, Natalie was given a parking spot in the secure underground lot reserved for administrators. A relief, but not enough to erase the memory of weeks spent under constant surveillance. The experience left deeper scars than logistical inconveniences. Natalie found she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She installed a security system in her apartment, changed her phone number, and signed up for a self-defense course. Parking lots, which had once been mundane, became zones of heightened awareness. She scanned for any car with a running engine or a silhouette in the driver's seat, instinctively measuring distance and escape routes. Friends told her she was being paranoid. Kevin was behind bars, but Natalie knew better. Kevin had been one, but others existed. There were people out there who watched, waited, and planned. Some nights, after finishing a late shift, Natalie would sit in her car for a few minutes, checking the surrounding vehicles before turning the ignition. Most evenings passed quietly. Yet the memory of weeks being stalked remained, a constant shadow over her sense of safety. Security measures reduced risk, but could never fully erase it. Natalie had always thought of herself as practical, capable of handling most challenges. This experience proved how vulnerable anyone could be. She learned firsthand how thin the line between normalcy and danger could be, how quickly a place that should feel safe could become a trap. The employee garage, once an afterthought, had become a nightmare landscape where the ordinary, the hum of fluorescent lights, the echo of footsteps, was laced with threat. Months passed. Natalie adjusted her routine, but vigilance had become second nature. Every time she left the hospital, she double-checked her surroundings, the position of vehicles, the patterns of shadows. Each flicker of a light, each movement caught in her peripheral vision sparked tension she couldn't shake. The story of Kevin Marsh spread among the hospital staff, a cautionary tale about boundaries and workplace safety. Some colleagues dismissed the experience as terrifying but improbable. Yet for Natalie, it was a harsh reality that altered how she moved through the world. It reminded her, and anyone who heard it, of how quickly life could spiral when someone's obsession crossed into action. Despite the trauma, Natalie found small victories in reclaiming her routine. Parking in the secure lot, walking with coworkers when she could, practicing her self-defense skills, each act helped her regain a sense of control. Yet the memories lingered. Late-night silence, once neutral, now held tension. The echo of footsteps in empty spaces triggered instinctive caution. She had been reminded that vigilance isn't paranoia. Sometimes, it's survival. The hospital administration didn't stop there. They implemented new reporting procedures for any staff who felt unsafe, making the garage a priority in their safety plan. Lights, cameras, and guards were no longer optional. They became standard. Natalie's nightmare became the catalyst for change, ensuring no one else faced weeks of being stalked in a supposedly safe space. Even with the security improvements, Natalie remained cautious. The experience had reshaped her understanding of personal space, boundaries, and awareness. She realized the world could be cruel and that safety is fragile. Yet she also learned resilience. She had confronted danger, acted decisively, and survived. The pepper spray, the careful observation, the planning, all of it had mattered. On quiet nights, when she left work alone, she would sit in her car for a few moments, checking for shadows or waiting vehicles. Most nights ended without incident, but she could never fully forget the sensation of being watched. The knowledge that someone had studied her patterns, had lurked in the garage, had been ready to make a move. It left an indelible mark. Natalie's story was not just about fear. It was about the thinness of security, the unpredictability of human behavior, and the need for vigilance. She had learned that even familiar places could become dangerous, and that preparation, awareness, and assertiveness could mean the difference between safety and harm. Her caution became a protective instinct, her experience a lesson she carried forward in every parking lot, every dimly lit street, every routine that once felt mundane. Sometimes, as she drove away from the hospital, headlights cutting through the night, Natalie reflected on the weeks she had spent under surveillance. She thought about how easy it had been for Kevin to exploit patterns, how small lapses in attention could have escalated into catastrophe. It was a sobering reminder. The line between feeling safe and being in danger is thinner than anyone likes to admit. And it can be crossed in an instant by someone who watches and waits. Even with guards, lights, cameras, and secure lots, Natalie understood a fundamental truth. No system could eliminate risk entirely. Humans are unpredictable, and sometimes danger hides in plain sight, in places we believe are secure. That awareness stayed with her, a quiet, unshakable vigilance that defined her daily routine. Yet she survived. And in surviving, she gained clarity about preparedness, boundaries, and the importance of trusting one's instincts. She had faced an unseen threat, acted decisively, and emerged stronger, carrying a story that would remind her and others that even in ordinary spaces, vigilance matters, courage counts, and safety, while never absolute, can be fiercely protected. Story 9. Joshua was 29 when his grandfather passed away. The old man had made it to 93, sharp as ever and stubbornly independent until the end. He left Joshua, his only grandkid, his small, single-story ranch house, a place tucked into a quiet street where neighbors had lived for decades. Joshua had spent countless summers there as a kid, pulling weeds, watering the garden, and soaking up the stories his grandfather told about life before cell phones and streaming services. The house held decades of memories, and Joshua felt honored to inherit it. He took a week off work to go through everything the old man had left behind. It was emotionally heavy. Closets smelled like a mix of Old Spice and mothballs. Drawers overflowed with photographs, letters, and bills. The garage was packed with tools, half-finished wood projects, and dusty tins of nails. Joshua decided to keep a few things. His grandfather's hand-built toolbox, a stack of vinyl records, and the vintage Zenith console radio that had perched on the living room mantel for as long as he could remember. The radio was something special. Made in the 1940s, with a warm wood cabinet and a fabric-covered speaker, his grandfather had restored it years ago, replacing tubes, rewiring it until it hummed perfectly. Every evening, he tuned in to AM talk shows, the dial glowing softly. Joshua couldn't imagine the house without it. Even if he had no intention of listening, he wanted it there, a symbol of the man who had raised him after his dad walked out. The first night, Joshua stayed up in the study, sifting through paperwork, insurance forms, bank statements, the house deed. Around 11 p.m., worn out from the emotional load, he brushed his teeth, changed into pajamas, and climbed into the guest room bed. Sleeping in his grandfather's room felt too intrusive for now. As he drifted towards sleep, he heard it, the faint crackle of static. The radio. He sat up, confused. He hadn't touched it, and the dial had been in the off position all day. Maybe the wiring was old, he thought. Radios could be finicky. Joshua got out of bed and walked into the living room. The dial glowed softly. He turned the knob off firmly. The static cut out. He stood for a moment, hand still on the dial, waiting. Nothing. Just an old radio acting up. Satisfied, he went back to bed. The next night, it happened again. Around midnight, static filled the room, louder this time, insistent. Joshua trudged to the living room and found the radio on, dial glowing, static flowing from the speaker. He unplugged it completely. Silence. Relief. But around 2 a.m., he woke to static again. The radio was on, unplugged, glowing, broadcasting without any power. He stared, rational explanations failing. No batteries, no hidden wires. Tubes lit up inside, working on some unknown energy. He reached out and turned it off. Silence. Glow gone. He waited, tense. Minutes passed. Nothing. By the third night, Joshua decided to let it do its thing. Maybe it would burn off the weird electrical energy. Around 11 p.m., he went to bed. Midnight came. Static crackled. He tried ignoring it, muffling his head under a pillow. At 1 a.m., the static shifted. A voice was in it. Joshua froze. Male. Older. Slow, deliberate. Familiar. Not just a random sound. Leaning closer, he made out the words. "Joshua, can you hear me?" His chest tightened. The voice, the cadence, the rasp, the warmth, it was unmistakable. "Grandpa," he whispered, "this isn't real. You're not real." The radio spoke patiently, almost amused. "I thought you'd react like that. I don't want to scare you." Joshua's mind screamed that it was impossible. Grief, stress, hallucinations, surely. But the radio was on, unplugged, and that voice, his grandfather's voice, was real. "Then tell me something only you would know," Joshua demanded. Static crackled, then clarity. "When you were 8, you broke my favorite coffee mug, the blue one from your grandmother. You buried the pieces in the backyard and said you didn't know what happened. I never told you I knew." Tears streamed. That story was true. Years of guilt and secrecy flashed through his mind. "Why are you talking through the radio?" he asked, voice shaking. "It's the only thing I could reach through. I don't understand all of it, but this radio, it carried me. 70 years I listened through it. Part of me is still there somehow." For the next hour, Joshua sat on the living room floor, talking to his grandfather. They went over memories, regrets, and words left unsaid. His grandfather's presence was fleeting, fragile. "I don't have long," the voice warned. "I'm fading. But I need to tell you something. There's a gas leak in the house. Under the kitchen, the line to the water heater. Small, but dangerous. I smelled it before I died. I didn't know it could be lethal. Please, check it. Call a professional." Joshua froze. A gas leak? Could this really be happening? But something in the urgency made him act. He called the emergency gas hotline at 2 a.m. A technician arrived within 30 minutes and located the leak exactly as described. Minor for now, but potentially deadly. Repairs were made immediately. After the technician left, Joshua sat in the living room, stunned. The radio was completely silent now. No glow, no static, no voice. He cautiously turned the dial, and the radio worked like any normal device, tuning into AM stations with clear sound. But the otherworldly connection was gone. Whatever had reached him that night had vanished, leaving him with an overwhelming mix of awe and grief. Joshua stayed in the living room for hours, staring at the radio, hoping for another sign, some clue that his grandfather's presence lingered. But there was nothing. Morning light crept across the floorboards, illuminating the polished wood of the mantel and the Zenith radio perched on top. He realized his grandfather had truly moved on. The warning delivered, the last act of care complete. He felt both relief and a twinge of loss. He left the radio on the mantel, just as it had always been. He never tried turning it on late at night again. Though it sat silently, the memory of that impossible conversation remained vivid, etched into him forever. The gas line was replaced, carbon monoxide detectors installed, and safety ensured. But Joshua couldn't shake the feeling that the radio had been more than a tool. It had been a lifeline. Over the following months, Joshua renovated the house. He updated wiring, plumbing, and heating systems, modernized the kitchen, and refreshed the bedrooms. Yet the living room remained largely untouched. The furniture, the mantel, the Zenith radio, all preserved. That room had become a sanctuary, a quiet place where memories of his grandfather could linger without interference. Sometimes, late at night, Joshua would sit in front of the radio. He'd talk softly about his day, what he was struggling with, the milestones he had reached, the victories and failures that filled adult life. He never expected a reply. The radio never flickered on by itself, never hummed with static. Yet he could feel a warmth in the room, subtle but unmistakable, a presence that made the space feel alive in a different way. It was comforting, the sense that love doesn't just vanish, that some connections transcend life and death. Joshua thought about the night his grandfather spoke to him. It was impossible, yes, logically absurd. But the details, the accuracy of the warning, and the unmistakable voice proved something beyond reason. That night had saved his life, and he carried the truth in his heart. His grandfather had reached back from beyond to protect him when he couldn't. Years passed. Joshua made a life in that house. Friends and co-workers visited, noting the vintage charm, the polished floors, the warmth of the living room. He told the stories of summers spent gardening with his grandfather, of lessons learned at his knees, and of that night with the radio. But only to those who would understand. Some dismissed it as grief, imagination, or coincidence. Joshua didn't argue. He knew the truth, and it didn't require validation. He noticed small, subtle signs sometimes. A faint warmth where sunlight didn't reach. A feeling of being watched with affection rather than threat. Moments when he could swear the room shifted slightly, as if acknowledging him. Nothing overt, just whispers of presence. The Zenith radio remained the centerpiece, silent but sacred. Joshua also reflected on mortality and the nature of connection. The world seemed to grow colder, more detached, but he understood something deeper. Love, care, and protection could exist even after death. Bonds forged over decades weren't severed by the limits of the physical world. And some messages, he realized, came through the quietest of channels. Static, silence, objects imbued with meaning. Life moved forward. Joshua worked, socialized, traveled occasionally, and maintained the house. Yet he lived with a quiet awareness of how fragile safety was, how fleeting time could be, and how miraculous it felt that he had been given this extraordinary warning. The radio became a symbol, not of fear or loss, but of connection, of love that refused to end. On anniversaries of his grandfather's passing, Joshua would place a fresh cup of coffee on the mantel beside the radio. Sometimes he'd talk aloud, recounting memories, sharing small daily victories, thanking him for guidance, protection, and wisdom. He never heard a voice, never again, but he felt the presence, like a gentle weight or warmth, reassuring and constant. The house was safe, modernized, and comfortable. But the radio reminded him of something bigger, something that couldn't be fixed by renovations or alarms, the enduring nature of relationships. Some love is so strong that it bends reality, carving a path back from the impossible to save the ones left behind. Joshua often thought about the night he nearly ignored the radio. That simple decision, Choosing to investigate, to listen, to trust, had saved his life. It shaped him, made him more vigilant, more thoughtful, and more aware of the invisible threads that tie people together. Though the Zenith radio never spoke again, it became a silent teacher. It reminded him that life is fragile, that some guidance comes in unexplainable ways, and that presence and care do not always require a physical form. And in quiet moments, when he sat sipping coffee in the glow of the living room morning light, he felt profoundly grateful. Grateful for the life he had, for the lessons learned, and for a grandfather who loved him enough to reach across the boundary of existence to keep him safe. Joshua knew, deep in his bones, that the radio, and the presence it had carried, would always be part of him. That some bonds never break. That some voices, even when gone, can still echo with purpose. And that sometimes the most important messages come in the quietest ways, through static, silence, and love that refuses to fade. The Zenith radio remained, polished and proud, a quiet sentinel on the mantel. Every so often, Joshua would look at it and smile, a soft acknowledgement that while the voice was gone, the connection never really had been. And he carried that lesson into every aspect of his life. The world is bigger than we see, love stronger than we know, and some bonds reach beyond the limits of reason, time, and even death.